All right. Hey, Dinesh. So this is for anybody who's watching, this is like the fourth video that me and Dinesh are doing together. So for context, I used to work with Dinesh almost a decade ago. Wow. And I once wrote a thread about the how Dinesh helped me just figure out how to be more productive, figure out what's going on with myself, and we would have regular conversations one-on-ones, and I found them very useful. And I have since used some of those tools in those conversations with other people, and they have also told me that they found those conversations useful. So what we thought we'd do is we'd kind of role play a typical session that we would have one-on-one, and thinking that it might be useful for other people to see what it's like, but also more fundamentally, like just I could use one. I haven't had one in a while, and I'm hoping to get something out of it. I think we may end up talking about some money stuff, and I'm quite an open book, but not 100% open, so I might leave out some details, but I think it should still be useful enough or interesting enough. You should be able to get something out of it. Any
Cool.
thoughts, Dinesh?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, before this, you prepared kind of some near-term kind of goals and
Mm-hmm.
issues that you're facing. So
Right.
maybe just to start with that, and that kind of lays out a few different pieces
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what blockers you have.
Yeah.
Maybe just to zoom out a little bit, what's come up a lot from that write-up is so it talks about content,
Mm-hmm.
but underneath it, there's a lot of mentions about sales and cash flow and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you compartmentalize, say, money versus work or content or whatever you call it?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how broadly to go about this, but so I think I'm quite blessed in that I don't really need to worry about money day to day or even month to month potentially. But like I am always aware that, well, especially now that I'm a dad and like my wife and I are planning to move homes as well. So up until now, like the past decade or so, I've been living very frugally overall. Like I live in the, like but it's not like a super conscientious approach. So I will acknowledge that, like, well, I guess even before I started work, right? So even when I was a kid, I never really liked thinking about money. Like I just kind of I would prefer if it's not an issue and I don't have to think about it. And like, like when I first started working, like I didn't have a salary negotiation stuff in mind. Like, I'm just like, if it seems good enough, I'll just get on with it. I don't really want to think about it. And that was fine. And then I left my job, and then I started a Patreon, which my Patreon was able to like pay like a third of my bills ish. And so like where I'm at as a so I'm an author basically, right? For a living, what I basically do is I'm an author slash consultant. And consulting and book sales, they're like 50-50 ish in terms of how they pay the bills. And I have savings, so I'm doing okay. But I where I'm often conflicted about is, I guess, my mental model of myself from the start, I think, is kind of like a hobbyist, artist, creative who doesn't think too much about the business side of things, doesn't want to think too much about the money side of things. And at the same time, so that's like I think my emotional reality or my origin story. At the same time, I know intellectually that um if I were more precise about thinking about sales and money and so on, like it would be able to help me achieve more of my outcomes at a like more comfortably, or more achieve more of my desired outcomes more comfortably and more quickly and so on. But I'm still struggling with so I think how I'm mapping it for myself is like I'm trying to make a transition from Visa, the solo hobbyist creator author who's just hanging out in his study with his books and like, oh, what do I feel like writing today? Maybe I write this, maybe I write that. Like kind of random acts of content versus Visa as the kind of sole business owner of uh I call it Voltaic Publishing. And like what are like the business goals for that? What are like the targets or and so on. And does that answer your question? Like I'm sort of not sure.
Yeah. So, okay, quite a few things to dig into there. So, maybe just to start with, so you mentioned the transition from the solo hobbyist to solo business owner.
A professional, yeah. Hobbyist to professional, let's say.
Okay, so hobbyist to professional. Um, so do you, so how do you think of that? Do you think of the professional using the hobbyist stuff as the main way to make money? Is the professional
Yeah.
making money to support the hobbyist? So is the hobbyist a subset of the money-making professional? Or is the money-making professional compartmentalized a way to support a hobbyist who shouldn't be kind of tied to money making?
That's a very good question. Man, I've had conversations with my wife about this sometimes when we are on like long walks and stuff. And the kind of a bit of the tricksy quality is that my best writing usually happens when I don't feel constrained or pressured by like financial concerns. But I mean, also not I wouldn't go so far as to say that like creatives or artists shouldn't care about money at all or shouldn't worry. Like I think some constraints can be useful, but to answer the question more directly, I think so it's like so it's not a well negotiated relationship, which is probably representative of the issue or the puzzle, right? Like, which is that I think day to day I feel like the creative, and I don't think proactively enough about the professional side of things. And so like the professional comes in, like once a month or something when you're looking at a budget or you're looking at bills and stuff, and like, okay, we should start being more deliberate about these things. And so it's almost like I have a one-on-one in my own head, but it's not a very productive one-on-one. So I mean, I have like a mediocre one-on-one once in a while, and then maybe like every 6 months or something, I might have a more proper, okay, for real, let's really like nail down what the goals are. So it feels like so okay, yeah, I would say it feels like I'm both people, but I can speak for each person. I think the professional is just like the boss or the manager doesn't feel like he has a lot of authority over the artist. So it's like the artist is the one that's like, so if you imagine it's two people having a conversation, the artist is like, well, it's everything that I've done so far that's like earned us all the money or earned us all the audience and whatever. So like you should just leave me to do whatever I want. And the professional is like, well, that works to some degree, but like we should try and be more methodical. And then there's like a, kind of back and forth that doesn't dig deep enough to make any lasting changes. I feel. I mean, okay, that feels unfair. There are changes, but it's like the gradient of change is kind of underwhelming.
Okay, you said that the professional doesn't feel like he has a lot of, was it control over the creative?
Authority,
Ah, okay.
legitimacy. Yeah. So just I guess you just kind of imagine a manager who like I don't know. It's like has like shy cold feet or something like. When I say it, it sounds stupid, but like that's how the reality of it feels. I think.
Okay. And you said the gradient of improvement is slow. Was that what you said?
Yeah,
The,
it's
what was
kind
the
of
gradient again? Yeah.
yeah, so just the rate at which, so like my entire operation, I would say, is getting better. Like, so year on year is getting better. Like so each year you look at all my operations, like I'm getting more professional. So like I have my consulting set up, and like, the process of soliciting clients and following up and all of that is getting better. Um, well, so it's hard to talk about rate of publishing because I was working on like books, which like it's a long project. And so yeah, that's one of the challenging things about when the thing to be shipped is large. And I guess as I say this to you, I imagine like well, then the obvious thing is to have like intermediate steps along the way, which I'm sloppy about. So like, like I worked on Introspect for 2 years plus, and looking back, maybe it could have been a year with better, like if I had an internal all hands and like, okay, what was shipped this month? What chapters are we have struggling with? What, like I didn't really do that. Like I saw made me uncomfortable, I guess. But then when I look back at the whole process, I'm like, wow, could have been done in a year sooner? Like that should make me that also makes me uncomfortable. So it's like there's clear inefficiencies in both directions. And like I think when I zoom out and see the bigger picture, I'm like, well, compromise on both sides or something of that dimension, and everyone can be happier. But does that answer your question?
Okay. So when did the professional come into the picture? So
Uh,
there was it started with the creative, and the creative did a bunch of things.
Right.
and then the professional came in. When did it
Oh,
feel like a
I mean,
professional was needed?
right. I mean, so when I left my job, well, okay, about 3 months after I left my job. So the first 3 months I was like, okay, holiday mode, just relax, unwind, decompress, whatever. And then about 3 months in, I'm like, okay, I have like half a year to a year's runway, and I need to find some path to audience author fit or whatever. I need to do some kind of something to. So at that point, I feel like the professional was like unlocked. Like it started, okay, you should try tweeting, you should try doing this thing, you should try doing that thing, see where the resonance is. So I was quite methodical in that phase. So that's like 2018. And then towards the end of the year, I was talking to more people, and I got my first consulting client, and that was like a longer engagement than I think what is ideal for me, but it was super valuable because it helped me even just think of myself as like providing services for sale. Um, and then working on the and then yeah, I guess after so I know that I have a professional skill set that I can activate. And the funny thing is I do activate it for my clients. Like when I sit down, so it's funny, I'm witnessing this conversation happening, and I'm like, oh, I'm on this side of the table. But like normally when I'm helping my clients, who are usually like creatives or early stage startup founders or whatever, and I'm helping them figure out their positioning, figure out all their stuff, that I get very much into professional mode. I'm like, okay, what's the messaging here? What's the target audience? How do you know it's going to work? How do you know it's not going to work? So on and so forth. And I don't bring that to my own stuff. Historically, I think in the past couple of years, I didn't bring that energy to my day to day or week to week very much. Until my son was born, I guess. So it's been a year. It's gonna be a year in a week or so. And so for the first 6 months, 9 months, like it's like, like I saved up for this so that I can be present and not worry about work that much. But enough time is passing that, I would not psychologically, emotionally tolerate another year like the first year, which I mean, I think it's normal if you're having a kid, right? But yeah, I just want to, and I think it's also true that not seeing the needles move on the things that I care about professionally or as an author. So not even say professional. So even the hobbyist has like creative goals, like, or like, he wants to write certain posts that he feels should exist that don't currently exist. He wants to get like audience engagement on certain things that haven't happened yet. And some of these things I think I anticipated or I vaguely assumed would have happened already, and they haven't happened yet. They are like, it is again, like the progress is just slower than ideal. And so yeah, it does feel like, and the other data point is like every time I have a conversation with someone who is just high functioning in general. So like recently I chatted with I think Connor from Rome, was a friend of mine, and just having that conversation, not even specifically about like my work, right? Just talking, and you just get into procedural thinking and be like, well, like this thing causes that thing to happen, that thing, and I'm like, I could be prioritizing better, or I could be focusing and so on. So I know that introducing some procedural thinking, or however you want to put it, professional energy, helps me achieve my goals better and faster if I do it properly. And yeah, so I just want to do it better. So if I mean, yeah, so you asked when, started in 2018. Um Felt like it backs away in the middle of a large project, but it comes back in towards the end when it feels like, okay, we're crossing some implicit deadlines that we shouldn't be crossing. So like, can we check in more, micromanage more? Yeah,
Okay. It feels like the kid has played a part in this, but we'll get to that in a bit,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Because it feels like the creative could do what he
Mhm.
wanted, against the professional for a while. But now that you have external quote unquote
Yeah.
deadlines and commitments, the professional maybe has more of
Yeah.
a kind of
I mean,
a
yeah. So one thing I know that I would be doing if I didn't have a kid is that I would be traveling more to meet like collaborators internationally, and that kind of is a context in which I know that I'm more productive generally. And but that's like, so I don't think traveling is an option right away. And but yeah, I mean, you're right. So basically it's just having constraints is makes it tighter in a way. which is probably
Okay.
for the best. I think.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like I'm speaking to the professional, right, in this chat. What does the
Yeah.
creative think about all this? Does the creative think that he, does the creative feel that he needs to work more tightly or be more um coordinate more with the professional, given that the professional now has external constraints? Or does the creative, I mean, I don't know how much you compartmentalize this
Yeah.
yourself, but does the creative understand any of what's going on?
I think so. So the interesting thing is even the creative is internally conflicted. So like there's like so you can almost imagine like in political parties or whatever, right? There's like the
Mm,
far extremists and stuff. So like
mm,
the most radical point of view that some of the creative holds, but not all, is that oh, you should really just give yourself as much time and space as possible to like freestyle and explore, and like if it's not working, you just wait and it'll happen.
no,
Which
who's saying that? The creative?
the far end of the creative
Ah, okay, sure.
spectrum.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm,
would
mm-hmm,
say I
mm-hmm,
even so even if the professional's not in the room, like if I'm
mm-hmm,
at a creative
mm-hmm,
conference or whatever, I'll say I don't really agree with that. Like there's some element of truth to it in that in some contexts where it might be used, it might be helpful to think that so that you expand your like lens. But it's
mm-hmm,
not, if you just kind of numbly take that as a truism that's applicable all the way, like you're gonna like then you're gonna waste time. I think the biggest tragedy for a creative is you spend 2 years working on a book and no one wants to read it, right? So like
mm-hmm,
and like my saving grace a little bit is that even in my casual natural creative sense, I think I still do care, like do people care about this, I do want to like uh just test things. So the saving grace of my process is like I haven't produced anything. I haven't spent a big block of time and or resources or whatever producing things that don't work. But that's always the question of you don't know what you didn't do that could have been potentially better. But like so, I mean sorry, you're asking, does the
yeah.
creative understand like the constraints? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
does the creative know that, okay, stuff has changed? So, okay, so just to backtrack a little bit, it
Mhm,
sounds like the creative has always had some frustration about moving slower, right?
mhm,
Moving the needles on, I mean, not seeing the needles move on creative goals, what you mentioned earlier.
mhm.
And it feels like that's always been true. And, I've read your stuff before, and there's always been some frustration at moving faster. But
Wait, when you say
there's,
so you mean frustration at not moving faster?
yeah, not moving faster, right? There's
Yeah,
on the just the creative side,
just yeah,
right?
true. Yeah,
Even so, outside, so remove the professional, even the
yeah.
creative before
By
having
himself, yeah.
professional needs had some frustration about not moving the creative needle faster.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's an additional element or additional dimension now,
Mhm.
which is that there's external constraints placed on the professional
Right.
to have to manage the creative, right? Do you get what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
So it feels like there's an additional element here. Does the creative understand that there's an additional thing beyond just moving faster for the sake of a creative purpose? There's moving faster for kind of a business, financial, professional need. And
Mm,
does the creative almost agree with that? So it sounds like the creative wants to release stuff as a creative, and you should have some timeline for that and release it and not just
right.
uh descend into the process.
Yeah. So
But
actually,
yeah.
there's some interesting nuance here, which is that it's not just about speed is so when you say speed, we are implying that some kind of quality or some kind of form remains constant, but that's not actually true. And so
Mhm,
the interesting thing is that so even without the professional involved, one of the internal creative conflict is okay, I would like to write 10 great essays and no bad essays, right? But
mhm,
that's difficult to do to the point of maybe impossible. Like you basically have to make bad stuff or make like
mhm,
mediocre stuff to get a chance at making great stuff. And so one way to, if you're precious, and like, yeah, the creative part of me I think is quite precious. But like if the precious part of you is like, well, I don't want to release mediocre stuff or like average stuff, then to get to good, it's gonna take a lot longer. And so even
Mhm.
without the professional involved, there's this interesting trade-off question of like, well, so it's basically it's like your ego, right? It's like, are you ego is your discomfort? So the trade-off is like, is your discomfort with being perceived even by yourself as shipping some mediocre stuff here and there? Like, are you willing to so with regards to speed? So let's say it's like you could do 10 great essays in 3 years, but the cost is you have to also ship like 20 mediocre ones. Or you only ship 10 great essays, but it takes 5 years instead because you're like doing all the mediocre stuff in-house and working with it and like kind of like tinkering with it in stealth mode or whatever, and you don't get the value of useful feedback and engagement and stuff. So it's like, yeah, I think I used to think I would choose 5 years, or it's probably longer than that. It's probably like seven. Actually, when I say 5 years, that's me like minimizing it. It's probably like 7 years. So like, and when I say 7 years, I'm like, ah, fuck, I can't do that. But like, I don't have 7 years. But like, so if it's between 3 years of, so I think that's true. I think if it's between three, which is like kind of embarrassing to admit, but I think it's true. If it's 3 years and great essays and some mediocre essays, or 5 years and only the great essays, I think I would have chosen the 5 years, which is like, but the reality is it's actually 7 years. And I don't have, I even without a child, I don't feel like I have, well, especially with the, I mean, so now I have the child, so I can't, the hypothetical where I don't have the child is no longer relevant. With the child, 7 years, um, to get like 10 great essays and no mediocre essays, that is not, survivable or manageable. Like, well, we can get into the nitty-gritty about what precisely that means, but like, um choosing the 7 year path over the 3 year path now seems irresponsible. Like, it's irresponsible to my family potential. Like, it's like I'm choosing to protect my feelings of, oh, I don't want people to see that sometimes I write bad essays, versus that means I'm gonna like delay everything by whatever. And the model that I just described is probably missing second order effects that I'm not right. So it's probably reality is probably even more crazy than what I just described. And that is that's kind of it's just shitty
Okay,
to
so
yeah.
there's some meat here. So wait,
Right.
so let's just kind of make this a little bit more legible.
Yeah.
So the creative would choose what you just said, just to confirm, is the
Right.
creative would choose 7 years versus 3 years with mediocre, right?
So
I mean,
so
okay, so the creative thinks it's 5 years,
right,
but the professional knows five is actually seven.
right. Or more. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, but the creative would choose five over three.
Mm, yeah.
Okay,
And yeah, they would never say I'm choosing the 5 over the 3. Right? That's
I know,
the
okay,
quote
sure.
that's like,
Yeah,
nobody says I'm never gonna write my symphony. They
yeah,
say I'm gonna write it tomorrow, right? It's always just pushing it
okay,
slightly out, but yeah, you get it.
sure. But before you had, let's just say, external
Mm,
financial commitments and constraints,
right.
your professional looking at the creatives like, hey, you think it's going to be five, it's actually going to be seven, and you should choose three. But the creative can say, no, I want the five instead of the three.
Right.
The professional says choose the three. The
Right.
creative says, no, I want the five, and I
Right.
can make it four, whatever.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like the creative has won, but there's no real consequence to that, right? Is there
Yeah.
any consequence if the professional loses that?
Not really. No. It's just time. It's just
Okay,
unknown, vague.
okay. Does the
You'll never
creative
know.
understand that now, though, it's a slightly different situation because
Yeah.
if you win the professional and you choose five,
Hmm.
it's got all these externalities because you have external commitments and constraints. So if the So say the professional wasn't around to bug the creative about this, would the creative still choose five? Or does the creative understand that, hey, okay, I and I'm making it sound more, kind of schizo than it is because all of this ultimately is one person
Yeah,
deciding.
but it is conflicting desires and goals. So
Yeah, but does the creative side understand that the situation has changed? Or does the
yes. Yeah.
creative
Yeah.
just feel like, hey,
No,
it's still,
yeah, so I can make this even more precise. So like
yeah,
what this looks like in practice is, so
yeah,
if you chose the professional path, that means this month I shipped 4 essays, 3 were meh, one was pretty
yeah,
good, right? Whereas the other one is like there were no great essays this month. Nothing went out this month,
Mhm.
and 1 month has passed. And when there was no family constraint or whatever, like 1 month has passed, what do you do? Nothing, whatever. I mean, I'm hanging out with my friends. Like
Mhm.
it'll
Mhm.
be fine. I'm like it was easier for the creative to um rationalize nothing seems to be happening outwardly as it's fine.
And the
But
professional went along with it.
yeah, because so in that exchange, the creative
Yeah.
tells the professional, well, what's the cost? It's fine. There's not going
Yeah.
to be any.
Mhm.
It just takes a
Mhm.
while longer. Like deal with it.
Mhm.
Like, and the professional doesn't really have a like. Okay, I can't argue with that. Like, sure, you're the one making the work, so
Mhm.
fine.
Mhm.
Whereas now the professional can be like, well, this month we shipped nothing, so our audience grew nothing. Our like blah blah blah. And like if you had done something, like we would have something to show, we would have some numbers go up, we would have some this, that. And I mean, even without that conversation, I think like feeling the external reality around me while nothing is being shipped, like it's unpleasant. It's more unpleasant now than it was 4 years ago.
But so what does the creative say when the professional says that?
And the professional says we should ship something this month.
Yeah,
um
because yeah.
uh, I mean, so the creative just kind of stamps the feet and be like, well, but it's not good enough though. It's not whatever. So it's like just kind of I have to,
Okay. Mhm.
right. That's the truth of it. Um, and so it's really just I'm trying to, and I have been on the other side of this with other creators who are like just starting out and they're like, like I have to write something good. And I do think there's this pattern where at every threshold that I cross, I seem to have to learn some version of this again. So like when you're just starting out and nobody knows who you are and you're a pure hobbyist, you can just publish crap and no one cares and it doesn't matter. And then you cross some threshold where you feel like, okay, I'm important now, or I'm of whatever, people are listening to me. I should make sure that anything I put out is of a certain standard. And then that actually hurts the creative process as well, because then if you preemptively insist that something has to be good, then you don't get to find all the interesting angles to it and stuff. And so it's like, yeah, if I look back, I have these cycles, like every maybe when I cross 10,000 followers, maybe when I cross 50,000, or after I sold my first book, after I sold my second book. Like it's quite reliable each time. These quite reliable pattern that each time I cross some threshold, I then get like self-conscious about not showing bad work, or not showing. I mean, again, when I ship the what I think to be bad, like the general audience still likes it, and then I'm like, well, the audience doesn't get. It's which I don't know. It's maybe some level of preciousness that I feel like I can't afford anymore. Or like I don't even think it's actually a good way to work. Like I think it's really just uh cycle emotionally or psychologically um safe, or like it's just but it's not in I don't think it's a good way to work. I don't know if I
Okay.
drifted.
So okay, so trying to mix it up.
Mhm.
Can the professional, right? Why don't we
Uh,
just let the creative do whatever he wants? And the professional's like, okay, whatever the case, we're gonna get 4 articles out this month. If the creative's not writing it, I'll write it.
Probably it's probably possible. I haven't got to the stage where that feels necessary yet. But I do
Mhm.
think that is my so like like if so I do think I have like thresholds of like, okay, I'm in a crisis now, that kind of thing. So like if I felt like I was approaching a crisis situation where I have to like worry about my financial situation and like that, I do think I would go into, okay, it's time to dust off like the serious content marketing kind of directed
Mhm.
playbook that's very uh solve pain points
Mhm.
directly.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah. So the creative thing I'm trying to do is you can still be put in terms of like readers as customers and their pain points and whatever, but like
Mhm.
it's trying to reach for more nuanced kind of stretchy things. But I do know that there are like short wins that I can do that. So it's not um creatively stimulating, I guess, or it doesn't level up the parts of the creative skill set that I want to level up. But like it is also a valuable skill to have, and it is a thing I can do. I just haven't felt like I've had no choice yet. That
Okay,
sounds
but
privileged or something.
why do you have to wait until you have no choice to try it out?
Um, that's a good question. I guess.
Or why do
Hmm.
you feel, is it who's making this decision, the professional or the creative? That okay, if shit hits the fan, I will do it. But before that,
Yeah,
I
so
won't.
so the creative is ultimately in charge, I think, if I look at my dynamic. And it's like,
Ah.
he allows the professional to come in and like, add process, add priority, change priorities and stuff. He tolerates that, I guess, rather
Mhm.
than um which I feel
Agrees
is
with
less
it.
than ideal. I feel like there's a more equitable win-win partnership that could be negotiated. But I think that is the truth of the situation. It's like there's a there's a
Ah.
creative guy at the heart of the thing, and the professional feels like almost like a, I don't know what's the word, like a contractor, right? Kind of like not an equal, like they should be co-founders really, I think. But it feels like an unequal relationship.
What about instead of co-founders, giving them two different startups?
Hmm. Well, I guess so. In a sense, my consulting operation is like 90. Like the creative is not very much involved in the consulting operation. He's kind of it's so yeah, they're like in the same office building, like, or the same, like if I'm thinking out to our old office, it's like, yeah, one sits on that side of the room and one sits on this side. Like they might chat at lunch, or whatever. The creative does give some useful feedback to the professional on the consulting process, but he's not like, oh, this is my baby and I want to, or this is my, so the professional does take full ownership of the consulting machine, and the creative is like, leave me alone to work on the Substack or work on the. I don't, even the
Mhm.
Substack, I think, is not, well, the creative is conflicted about the Substack, like to what degree he wants to be working on it versus yeah, that's the mess. Sorry, I keep drifting from
Okay,
what your question is.
yeah, no, so that's fine. So in your write-up though,
Hmm.
the one in your prep,
Yeah,
the prep write-up you did,
yeah,
it sounds like the professional needs stuff from the creative, or at least a lot of those points are updates to uh fan and introspect.
right.
But it sounds like fan and introspect are the property of the creative.
uh
Okay. So
hmm.
maybe who owns fan and introspect?
I wouldn't say it's interesting. uh hmm so it feels like, so let's call again, like the wider entity, let's call it Voltaic. So they belong to Voltaic. They were they were produced by the creative. The professional is the one that sells it, markets it, whatever. But if the professional tries to do anything drastic, or drastic in the eyes of the creative, so the creative is like a veto, I guess. Like there are some things that, so for example, several people have suggested to me, hey, just like don't worry about the formatting on introspect EPUB. Like just freaking just, if it breaks, it breaks. Just ship it as an EPUB and let people deal with it. And the creatives like, no, we're not shipping that until it's until the formatting is decent. And so does that make
Okay,
sense?
but okay, so
That's
just
not
maybe
ship.
zooming out,
Okay.
the consulting is definitely owned by the professional.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
The
It
creative's not
sounds
very invested.
like so okay, what we're trying to figure out is so one of your points specifically is 10 hours away from an EPUB,
Mhm.
and it feels like you want to get the EPUB out because that will unblock some other stuff.
And even actually, now that having written this out, so like a bunch of things is, just writing this thing a few
Yeah,
days ago clarified some shit for me that I was like, well, why the fuck is this? So I think even just getting it off the plate will
yeah,
be a godsend for me, because it's just
yeah,
always there. But yeah.
sure. But I'm trying to understand. Okay, so for EPUB formatting,
Mhm.
right? And correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like what you want to do is get from PDF to EPUB, which is just formatting, or is it more stuff than that?
So the annoying thing is that I wrote the introspect PDF book very, it was formatted in a way that used subheaders and a bunch of stuff in a way
Mhm.
that when you
Mhm.
convert it to plain text, a bunch of it breaks. So like I have to
What do you mean
fix,
by breaks?
like there are subheaders that need to be bolded. There's the
Ah,
line breaks and stuff. A bunch
but
of
none of that. Okay, who does that? Is it the creative or the professional? I
Nobody,
mean, both.
nobody does it. That's why it's not
Okay.
done yet.
No,
But
no, no,
like,
wait, wait.
yeah,
Okay, so not so much of who does it. Who does that task belong to?
it belongs to
Who
the
is
professional.
authorized?
It belongs to the professionals
Do
to do
you,
it.
I mean, it's,
Well,
I don't know. Do
but the
you,
creative has
I know
veto.
you're saying that, but that's not the, that's not what I'm getting. Because
Sure,
it feels like
okay.
the professional is convinced that, hey, this stuff is important
Yeah,
because we have the bills to pay and blah,
yeah.
blah. And so why doesn't the professional just step in and format the EPUB?
Actually, I think that's
What
what's happening.
it
I think
no,
so.
but it feels
So,
like the creative needs to give permission to the professional to do it.
I think that's how it started out. I do think the creative has been worn down in the past year or so, and he's been like, well, okay, like if you wanna do this thing, just go and do it, lah. Like I can't be fussy much longer, something like that. Does that make sense? You're not
Okay.
convinced?
No, but I'm trying to understand. It still sounds like it doesn't belong to the professional. It still belongs to the creative and needs to get permission from the creative, but now the creative is exhausted.
Yes, that sounds
But
exhausting. Yeah.
why doesn't it belong to the professional? I mean, I'm trying to understand how the creative thinks of ownership. So the creative, it doesn't feels like there's any ownership of consulting, right?
Yeah.
Why does the creative feel that it owns formatting of the EPUB?
Oh yeah, because if the EPUB is poorly formatted, it will affect the reader experience, which will affect which is like on the creatives. It's like so the funny extreme version of this is when people leave bad reviews of books because the book was delivered in a bad quality, and the author is like, I can't do anything about that, right? But so this is something that you actually can kind of influence. So it's like the chef cares about the takeout box because if the person who buys the takeout doesn't like the meal because of the takeout box, it makes the chef look bad, something like that.
Okay, so it sounds like anything to do with public perception of the work, creative gets vetoed over.
Yeah, that's true.
And only because consulting has no public perception, the professional has free reign and the creative doesn't care.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so there have occasionally been some people who see something about the consulting process and they perceive it to be so like, I consulted with some guy and he asked if he could tweet about it and he did, and it went a little bit viral amongst some like very cynical people. But I saw that and like so both my professional and my creative saw that and we all laughed about it. Like, those people just don't get it. It's like why would something be worth this much money to that person when whatever? So like there are some negative public perceptions that don't affect the creative at all. Like so like even if it's about the whole thing,
Ah,
but if it's something like this book which was written from the creative's labor for 2+ years, if the book gets well, again, it's interesting. This is something I should drill down deeper in for myself. But like I mean, I just shared it just to say that there's
okay.
some
Yeah.
variation,
Yeah.
but
So
broadly you're correct. Yeah,
it feels like that tweet example is kind of easy to understand because the creative doesn't care about everyone.
yeah,
It doesn't care about the people it's not writing for, and the
right,
cynics, it doesn't feel like it's writing for it, but it cares. But formatting would impact the people it's writing for.
right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so a negative perception among the audience. Okay, so this is useful. Um,
I don't think
can
a
we
negative.
give,
It's like a
yeah,
missed opportunity to. So like there's a whole
sure.
cluster
Yeah,
of interest people who bought Introspect and haven't read it because they want EPUB rather than
yeah,
PDF,
uh,
and it's meant to be read in the PDF. It's the current version at least, and so to translate that into something that they will read, but like if they then read it and go, oh, I didn't get how this part mismatched that part. It's like, well, you only really get a chance. Well, that's not true. But I was about to say
I
you only
mean,
get a chance to read
yeah,
for
I
them to
mean,
read it
this
once.
just feels like another instantiation of 3 years with mediocre versus 5 years of
Yeah, so
perfect,
as when you say that, the thing is,
right?
I could ship it, and then if people complain about something broken within it, I can fix it, and I can just update the thing. If it came to that, but yeah, I guess
But
the
the
creative,
creative doesn't like that because that's equivalent to 3 years with mediocre, right?
yeah, I think we are open to being persuaded. otherwise, and it would be good to. But
Okay.
so yeah,
Okay. Can we give the professional, I mean, can we, how do we, any way of compartmentalizing this where the professional gets free reign over some part of the audience or some aspects of the audience, or the creative won't let go?
I think
Or how does the creative think about that?
I think we just haven't had clear conversations about this. So like,
Ah, okay.
I trust
Mhm.
my respective parts to, like, if I sat down and had them have a, like, if I wrote out a dialogue between the two, I expect both to be reasonable. Like neither will be like, no, I'm not doing
Yeah.
that because whatever. Like, if
Mhm.
like, oh no,
Mhm.
let's find some arrangement that seems equitable to both. It's just that that conversation has not happened. Like it's just kind of, it's just
Why?
deferred. Well, it just, I guess it just never seemed, well, my instinctive answer is that it just never seemed like a priority. But there's probably some deeper answer that's like it's uncomfortable, maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay, but I mean, it sounds like all of this is top of mind at least because you've articulated it, and this, it sounds like the main thing that you added as a goal or blocker. So what is the difference between that and priority enough to have a conversation about and resolve? Or what is the threshold that is missing?
Mm,
Right,
no,
of all the things you could have written in a doc to prep for a call, you wrote about
oh
I
well, I
mean,
mean, so these are the
yeah.
things that I feel like you would, that we have a shared understanding of, that you would
Mhm,
be helpful with. Like, so like
mhm,
I also have, like, like, I mean, another window I have open is like this, the nitty-gritty stuff of, well, in this essay about wretchedness, do you also want to talk about coping mechanisms? Like there's like 100 little micro things like
mhm,
that that's
mhm,
also always on my mind. But I don't really need, I mean, so there are things that people can help with that, I guess. But like, I get, yeah, I wake up every day and I tend to, so what, like, apart from like diapers and all that stuff, like I tend
mhm,
to
mhm,
get quickly into the weeds of the stuff that I'm working on.
mhm,
And so
mhm.
it's from time to time when I step back. But like, yeah, I don't step back enough. I think this has been true my whole life. It's a long running visa pattern of not doing like meta process analysis. Does that answer your question? You're
Mhm,
asking
mhm.
what threshold?
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like, so you mentioned the nitty-gritty and in the weeds of a particular essay or writing, but is that, that doesn't sound like it's something you feel like you need help with? I mean, okay, is that something you feel like you need help with?
In my writing itself?
Yeah.
Uh I
Or
don't think
is
of
it,
it.
yeah,
I guess I don't think of it as help. Like, so other things I think about that I didn't mention here are things like I should have a higher rate of collision with other thoughtful people, like just about anything. Because every time I do it, it does make me more productive. And so, like, one of the things the professional has, I think, suggested to the creative before, and the creative agreed, yeah, that sounds good. And then we haven't followed up much. A bit lah. It's, again, the gradient is, it's like it went from 0 to like 1, 2. Like, so I'm talking about talking with people, like scheduling a call, or just, even just texting a friend, like, hey, you want to talk about this thing on, that's an essay I'm working on. Like, that would save me sometimes a week of time or like a month of time. And it happens very ad hoc, like, just, I don't know, like random moods or whatever. But like, in the context of voltaic publishing, which is a creative business, like, it's makes business sense. Or even just, even without money and subscribers or whatever, in terms of, we're running a creative enterprise, it makes sense to get the creative intermingling with other creatives, because that just raises the creative quality out of the output. And yet I have not done that much, which I don't know if that reveals anything or says
ah,
anything.
okay. I mean, but that sounds like another instantiation of a professional creative conversation problem. Okay, I mean, so just maybe digging into that. Why does the creative, so the professional wants to schedule these events or
Yeah, just hangouts, calls.
hang out with the creative, and the, why isn't that happening? Who is, who is like blocking that from happening?
I mean, it feels like, yeah, it's the creative
Why?
being, I don't know, what's it, like, emotionally.
No, but what does the creative think will happen uh like what is the downside? What is the creative thing is the downside of what could happen?
Uh, I don't know. So that's I mean, so and it's especially funny because the history of my experience, like the past 10 plus years, has been practically every single time I have had a conversation with someone that I choose, it always goes well. Like I've never had a like the last time I had a bad experience would have been like when I was a teenager, maybe, which is like lifetimes ago. But um I still, so I used to host these inter-intellect salons, and every single salon I posted went well, but every single time before, like when I'm waiting in the Zoom, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be stressful, it's gonna be unpleasant, it's gonna I have to like worry about other people's feelings or whatever. And it turns out like within a few minutes, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like everyone is so on. So I mean, part of it might be like historical. I don't like it just seems I don't know if I even want to consider that as a as an
No, but
explanation.
so is
It's just
it
like
that
inertia.
but again, the creative feels like there's some perception from an intended audience that it wants to manage.
Mm,
So you said the thing about it, before the call, before the intellect salons,
mhm.
the creative felt what?
Mm, yeah, so the emotions that the creative feels are
Yeah.
quite uh they feel quite silly to talk about, but like it's very, there's even like some minor frustration and resentment at the idea of, it's just like you schedule a meeting or a date or whatever, like something with people consensually, and then like before that, like, oh, I can't believe I have to go and do this thing that I agreed to do. Right. So there's just this I don't know. So I wouldn't recommend people be uh what am I trying to say here? It's kind of stubborn, it's kind of resentful, it's kind of flighty and doesn't want to go out, doesn't want to do things, doesn't want to. So even so I'm reflecting on why don't you talk to friends? I think it's like there's some part of the creative that is like that fantasizes about being like a solitary genius working in isolation and coming out with everything by themselves, which again, like it falls apart under the slightest scrutiny, but like that requires some scrutiny, and like there are periods of time where I just don't have that.
Okay. Um, okay, so it feels like that's the shape of the creative, but the creative is still in charge, it sounds like.
Yeah.
It can be wrangled to get stuff done.
Mhm.
But in that case as well, does it feel like the professional has to get permission from the creative?
To meet friends.
Yeah, or to organize
uh
stuff.
uh doesn't feel like it needs permission. It feels yeah, again, so I guess it kind of feels like the professional is slightly in under the thrall influence of the creative. So the professional's like, well, I should recommend this. The creative seems to be in a mood today. Let's just not, like, like kind of like, why doesn't anyone bring, like, it's just yeah. So it doesn't feel like there's a proposal and a rejection. It's like the proposal doesn't seem to make it all the way through.
Okay.
Kind of.
Um,
But but
yeah.
the funny thing is, simply talking with some friends, like, so there is positive cascades that happen. So like, even like after this conversation, like even if we weren't talking about like the stuff that I brought up, if we were just talking about random stuff, I would probably then go on to talk to more people, and I probably then, like, there's like a positive spiral from like just, I guess, social contagion. Like if you choose the right people to motivate you or excite you and help you see how you're being kind of silly or small minded about something, just from back and forth. But yeah, sometimes just explaining what's been going on there's a click of like, oh, that's not sensible. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, if you go back to the EPUB example, where, okay, the professional wants to update a few headers so that you can get the EPUB out and that will have positive kind of cascades.
Mhm.
The creative is resisting that because perception of the audience to badly formatted EPUB is something the creative will be able to veto.
Uh, Actually, so until recently, there was also I think there's some of that maybe. There's also like a scale of project management component to it where, so like Introspect is like a 300 page EPUB. Um, or book PDF, whatever. And I was when I exported the thing into, so I used this software called Vellum, which is nice. But the previous software I used was shit, and that was just the unpleasantness of clicking around the pages and stuff turned me off from that. But I so the solution to that is find a better software and pay for it, which I
Mhm.
did. And so I got the new software, but I guess I hadn't updated my priors on how it feels to use the new software. And so I'm like, okay, the nature of my Google Docs formatting kind of split it up into like, so it's supposed to be split into like about 50 sections, and the sections get further fragmented into like 100 plus 150 something. It's just a stupid amount of fragments. And I was overwhelmed with the idea of going through all of them. But at some point, I can't remember when I did it. I just kind of, you know what, you should go into your, you eventually want to ship this. So let's just go in and make a little bit of progress. I was in one of my better moods, I guess. Let's go and make a little bit of progress. And so I just kind of merged fragments that go together, and it turns out, oh, it's just copying this and pasting it this and deleting that, and copy, paste, delete. And it's like, in a couple of hours, I could then get to the estimate of, oh, this is going to take 10 more hours only. Whereas before I had the estimate, it's like, I don't know how long this is going to take. Am I going to spend months on this instead of working on actually creative, interesting things? So until I had a decent estimate, like there was no buy-in from the creative. It's like, like
Ah,
let them, whatever. So it does seem like if I can get decent estimates on things, it's easier. So it's like a project management, which is on the professional actually. I think there's a part of the shittiness of this relationship is it's not shitty, but like suboptimal nature of this relationship is that again they don't split their roles as efficiently and elegantly as they should. So there are some things where like so okay, they're both me, so that's the mess. But like sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to do everything. Okay, this conversation is getting weird because I'm not sure if I should role play as multiple people, but like, okay, let's say manager and artist. There are some things where the artist seems to think he should take on managerial tasks, but he shouldn't really, I think. And there's some things where the manager feels like, well, the artist should probably do that, or I don't have the something to do that. And even I think just sitting down with myself and being like, okay, these are the tasks for the creative and these are the tasks for the manager will probably clarify some things. Like so there's
okay.
some like mutual resentment a little bit on both sides.
Yeah. So manager artist is a helpful kind of framing. So okay, it sounds like we're not going to get to a point where the artist um gives up part of the kind of property or kind of authority to the manager.
Mm-hmm.
So the manager still has to work with the artist to some extent to
Yeah.
convince the artist of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Right.
And it sounds like there are strategies. Okay, so you said something earlier, which is it's kind of a project management
Mm-hmm.
aspect for the manager to solve.
Yeah.
But one additional element that it feels like is under articulated here is there's an additional project management element, which is the manager communicating or convincing the artist, or maybe another way. Does it feel like there's a set of heuristics, and you have enough experience now to be able to tell if this is true? Are there a set of heuristics that the manager can get more out of the artist? And I'll give you one example. So it sounded earlier like you said something about there's some social contagion or social element to, if you add some social pressure to the artist, the manager can control, not control is the wrong word. The manager can get more collaboration out of the artist. And another heuristic sounds like if you can bound the task more efficiently along some dimension or via some mechanism, the manager can then get more collaboration out of the artist because the artist is
Yeah.
happier to collaborate. So it sounds like a set of heuristics that can make the artist happier to collaborate with the manager. Are those heuristics articulated? So you have like a toolkit of,
Yeah.
okay, let me try socially kind of pressuring
Right.
again,
Yeah.
pressuring is not the right word, but
Influencing.
socially influencing the
Yeah.
artist. Let me try maybe this project isn't bounded well enough
Right.
for the artist to be
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I so as I'm smiling as you say this because I have like the most mundane is the power switch on kind of issue here that you wouldn't surprise you to hear this, but like I don't schedule time for each set of tasks.
Mhm.
So it should be, and so like what gift can the manager give the artist? It's like Monday from 3 to 5 you can write whatever you want. Like I don't have that, you know. And then
Mhm.
on the other
Mhm.
hand, there should be okay, Tuesday 1 to 3, we are gonna double check each of our drafts for how long it might take to do it. Like so there's a bunch of like the
Yeah,
stuff that
Dylan.
I wrote for you, I think that counts in the like a managerial task or like a that just coming up with okay, this is the current state of this project. So it's kind of like preparing for a meeting, right? Or preparing
Mhm.
for all hands update. That happened completely ad hoc, but it should happen like weekly or bi-weekly ish, and it should happen on schedule. But I have not currently scheduled such a thing.
No, yeah, and you what you just said, the one of the best gifts you can give the artist is
A block of like time to
ah
yeah. And so you can like negotiate a
ah
quid pro quo. I give you this amount of time to do whatever you want, and then you let me or we figure out something where you do that. And so like
So it sounds like the point of coming up with the fact that the EPUB only takes 10 hours is not so much to tell the creative that, hey, the EPUB takes 10 hours, but to tell the creative, you only have to suffer through this for 10 hours and you have all the non-10-hour time.
yeah, and it's not even stuff like again like the lack of knowing how much time it would take is like so like once you
Mhm.
know it's 10 hours and you know that you can partition it okay 1 hour every week or something. The work itself is kind of interesting because you are rereading the work that you did and you're like oh this might
So the
inspire oh
creative's
actually
happy
I
with
should do
that.
this I should do that right so it's actually yeah so it's not even like work that I don't like to do or don't I can get myself to like it if it's in context with everything else that I'm doing. So all my stuff is like poorly contextualized, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like, okay, so one heuristic is possibly some kind of social contagion element. Another heuristic is something to do with time,
Boxing.
yeah, managing time for the artist so that the artist knows that
Yeah.
I'm free after this time or I have
Yeah.
this time available or
I
it's
mean, so as an engineer, it's like sprint planning, basically, which I have not. And yeah, when I left my job, I was like, I don't wanna, I wanna be free from the calendar, free from all hands, free from anything to do with that was fun for like 3 months. And then after that, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do last month? I have no idea. And then that's stressful, right? So it's like having a yeah. So I can't pull up a doc for you offhand that I could piece it together. It will take a bit of time, but I can't pull up for you like, oh, how did Visa spend his not even the whole year, right? But like what is like the like so like where what was done last quarter, right? Like I wrote a post here and there, I guess. Like I don't like it's so unprofessional basically. And yeah, so if you go I feel like at the heart of all of this, like I can probably rederive like so I'm writing notes as we chat and I can rederive a bunch of stuff. But like I feel like at the heart of it's really the first thing I said, which is like going from a hobbyist to a professional, what does that mean? Right? And it's like having process and having like I'm still not it's like yeah so it's like the manager part of me has not stepped into his role properly like it's like it's kind of half fucking like kind of
yeah. But I mean, it sounds like the additional element here is not so much the manager stepping into the role of a manager who does project management.
mhm.
It's specific project management it's a certain style of project management that appeases or makes collaborating with the creative more efficient. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's a class of project management which is just, hey, I have a project, how do I manage it?
Mhm.
But this is a Visa creative flavor of project management, meaning you have to understand what are the things that the Visa creative wants or the Visa creative works, and you can't learn that from project management classes or
Oh
project
yeah,
management
yeah,
material.
yeah,
That's you take project management material and you kind of morph it or skew it towards a particular set of things that you know about the Visa the creative.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I bet there's patterns with like artist management where there have been artists historically who are way more off the rails than me, who nonetheless were able to be productive because they were managed well, right? So it's
But
kind of
managed well means managed in a very customized way.
yeah to based on their idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, does the professional know, does the manager know this? The manager isn't trying to do project management per se. And I
Oh
mean,
man.
that should, so the manager is trying to do a very specific type of project management, right? You don't need to
Right.
be, the manager doesn't need to be good at project management.
In general. Yeah, it just needs to manage
Yeah.
Visa Creative. Yeah. It's funny. I have an essay about a similar thing uh in a different concept space. It's just like I don't know if you want to get into it. It's like it's a principle of like architecture or and it's just I guess information design or like
Mhm.
just how you arrange things. It's a very basic and it's like yeah, like you don't want to cut big gaping scars into the landscape because that causes all kinds of errors. And that's the equivalent of like kind of like force fitting a management practice
Mhm.
or whatever
Mhm.
that was designed for some other factory floor or something and you try and impose it on
Mhm.
a creative and it doesn't work. It's like you really have to be attuned to what the needs of the and so in this case the creative yeah so I guess I have been it's funny yeah I need to be more sensitive and have yeah I guess I'm like presuming things unnecessarily as well in when I'm putting on my manager hat I'm very yeah like oh we got to do this thing and do that thing and then it doesn't work that well it works a little bit but like it feels like it could be better and I think it's that like it's the
Yeah. And maybe, so there are a couple of things. One is, maybe there's value in reframing from a manager to who are the people who manage artists? What are they called?
I think they call artist managers they also call managers
Okay, how about what's another word?
with thesaurusing it
No, so okay. It feels so manager is
directors
kind of a loaded word, and it feels like the artist might,
uh-huh.
I mean, resist that. It's more like somebody who is able to nurture, almost like
Producer
I mean, parent is maybe a bit heavy,
yeah
but I'm just saying
I
somebody,
think producer works like a music
maybe
producer
producer. Okay.
sure yeah
So has the producer written, I mean, there might be value in the producer writing an article, just the producer, not the creative, right? The producer writing an article about how do I work with the creative?
hmm that's very interesting
And the creative can, I mean, again, I don't know how weird this is given that it's all one person, but the creative doesn't feel like it needs to get involved and have something perfect. This is just the producer writing an instruction manual
that's very interesting
to work with this particular creative, not creatives in general, but you can obviously make that a bit general to publish it. But even if it's not published, for the producer to write an instruction manual to work with this particular creative, where the instruction manual would have the specific, what as much as can be articulated, the specific set of heuristics that have worked in the past to get collaboration out of the creative. And again, you have so the social contagion. I mean, that's too vague to be useful. And I'm sure you
I can get way more
have
specific yeah
examples of what has happened. And this time thing, again, it feels like it's super underexplored because you
medium
have
blind
all
spot
these interesting elements of it that's coming out when you talk about it. One part, it's not even time management. It's almost like letting the creative feel like okay, I'm done with it and I have my free time, right?
yeah
There's an element not of the time that is apportioned or the time that is scheduled, but the time that isn't scheduled. Do
right
you get what I'm saying?
yeah
It's the
you're free
contrast of the
you're
time.
free
Yeah,
in this period
exactly.
yeah
Yeah.
these yeah I mean so it's just murky obligations help nobody right and
Yes.
I think I have a
Yeah.
lot of murky stuff in between so I need to be precise about like what obligations each party has to each other and
Yeah.
to
And
the
not for some
organization
grand project
yeah just
management
for
purpose,
month
but
on month
for the purpose of the creative, knowing that the instruction manual saying that the creative doesn't like it when you don't have a clear cut
oh man
schedule. So you now have an instruction manual for the producer. So the producer doesn't need to worry. It just needs to follow an instruction manual.
you
And
know
the creative
yeah
doesn't need to think about any of this. It's just waiting for nice things to happen to it
oh man
from an instruction manual that's been written from past
oh
experience with the creative.
feel like you just gave me several $1,000 at least. Like, yeah, I realized one of the twisty traps here is that I have a part of my personal identity from fucking when I was like 13. I think my teachers wrote this in my report card and shit. Like Visa is good at thinking on his feet. and improvising and whatever. And like it's almost like I think there's a part of me that's like, well, if you're so good at freestyling, you don't need a schedule, what? You don't need you can just, and that's wrong because it's like you need a container to improvise within and to improvise aside from. And but it's one of my long running default scripts that I haven't questioned, but it's clearly not working. So it's clearly, and I have experiences in other domains and other stuff and talking to other people. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I just haven't kind of brought it to the center of.
Integrated it.
Yeah, this is super. So this was worth the whole call, I think, for me. Like, just I'll probably write a fictional, like a on the nose. This is obviously about myself, but I'm just gonna give them two different names and just write this guy writing about working with that guy, but it's all me. But like, just I think pulling out those things, it feels like it's gonna be very rich and achieves what I wanted that didn't know how to get to, which is just something I described earlier. Like, if I can zoom out and look at, and I've helped like two friends in a romantic relationship who are like fighting, and they obviously love each other, they're obviously misunderstanding each other, and I can sense that dynamic happening out within myself, but I couldn't step outside to see that. And yeah, it's like there are clear possible efficiencies that don't even require like new introductions or new like big changes or whatever. It's just this, like, yeah. So I think the
No, yeah, and I would approach it not okay. So maybe you can approach it not as a new thing you're trying to figure out. You can approach it as I'm trying to catalog what has happened historically. So you're a historian. You're not a
beautiful.
scientist. You're a historian. I have worked with Visa the Creative for what
That's
30,
gonna be fun.
33, 34 years. These are the 5 things that have worked with him. That's it. You're not trying to come up with new stuff to figure out.
Things
You're
that
just cataloging what has happened in the past. Things
yeah.
that worked and haven't worked.
Yeah. Remember the referral guide? I still think about it
Yeah.
sometimes.
Mhm. Mhm.
That was a like, yeah, it's kind of white whale
Mhm.
thing. That which
So so approaching it from a historian perspective means that I mean it just how would the producer and the creative think about that?
sorry, say that again.
Would this be an UG feel for the producer?
No, he's excited. I feel excited to be
Okay,
like,
cool.
oh
Yeah.
man, like, because again, it's like, even so I bet, so again, it's like, it's weird when it's both me, but the creative is interested in seeing what the producer has to say.
Ah,
Right.
okay. So this feels like another heuristic.
Right.
How do you make the creative? How do you structure the producer's work in a way that has value to the creative? And it feels like what this instruction manual is really a project management category, but the creative is interested because it's again, you probably can articulate this better than I can, but it's almost like the producer's producing content. Sure, the manifestation of the project management is content,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Which is this instruction manual, and you're
All
getting
right.
buy-in from the creative because of that, versus the producer doing project management stuff, which is going to turn the creative off, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it feels like another, and there might be some historical kind of example of this, but it feels like another way to get buy-in from the creative is to make the project management feel like a creative endeavor. So how do you make scheduling a creative endeavor?
Wow, that's beautiful.
How do you make EPUB? How do you make coming up with an EPUB a creative endeavor?
Actually, yeah, so I have I feel like I finally figured out. So I think I wrote this in point two,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I used to agonize about the next steps for fan because every option seemed suboptimal. And then I really approached I was like, how do video games do it? Because I like video games. And it's like there is this whole culture of DLC. So it's like the add-on, like it's smaller than the big game, but it's like a addition to the game. And I'm like, I could do that. Like I could add a without like charging extra money, or I could, like, so I'm gonna probably raise the base price. So everyone who's already bought the first book gets the DLC gets the additional section for free. but I'll use the section to justify raising the price for new readers. And then it's like you can do free marketing, and this is everything is very beautifully aligned.
Yeah, but is the creative excited by that?
Yeah, I think even the
Ah,
idea of
okay.
how do you come up with, so the creative doesn't like the idea of let's update fan one, like not doesn't like the idea, but like every so talking about fan, right? So like going from fan one to fan two, there is a vague vision of fan two as a fully fleshed out, finished, beautiful masterpiece kind of thing. That's probably gonna take, I don't know, 10 years maybe. But and we don't want to like, so that becomes an feel because oh my god, we gotta wait so long, or we gotta take so much effort. And then there
Mhm.
is the let's just slightly update fan one with a few more stuff here and there. That's also unpleasant because the structure of fan one is it was written before I learned so many other things. So it's like it feels primitive, and like if I updated fan one, it's like I don't know, it's like pouring nice, like you already have a kind of mediocre thing and you add nice stuff to it, it's still gonna be mediocre. And so what feels to me like genius move is you have this separate entity that's connected to the first one, but it's clearly superior, but it's small, right? So it's like
Mhm.
starting out, and that that really I mean you get it intuitively already,
Turns
right?
the
So this,
creative on in a way.
yeah, it's a nice sweet spot. And you know,
Hmm.
another essay I'm working on right now is it's really I think the most interesting thing about my within this whole sphere of creative and everything, like my word vomits project, which I am now like at almost 90% done. It's like 87, 88, and I'm still working. I still add to it from time to time, and it's really the thing that I have just kept doing. Like I've never like I slow down sometimes, but I just keep doing it. And not many other things in my life,
Mm.
apart from like my marriage, I guess, but like, you know, like I've rarely stuck to a thing that I set out to
Mhm.
do and just stuck to it and just stuck to it all the way through. And I think is that the maybe genius in that is that each thing is just 1,000 words. That's it. I know I can type fast. I can type 100+ words in a minute or whatever. So 1,000 words at any point in time is not a big ask. And so and each time I ship one, it feels good. And so it's like the design of that project, maybe divine inspiration or luck or whatever, like it's just perfectly suited to get the most out of me in that
Ah,
context consistently for many years.
it
And I,
feels like there's another thing here that you should articulate.
which
So
is,
this is outside of social contagion,
yeah,
outside of, I mean, I don't know what it is, but there's another, uh, maybe it's
like a
structuring, work
sweet spot
structuring.
structure.
Yeah,
Yeah, like a
yeah,
sweet, there's a sweet spot of, I mean, it's kind of like the flow, you know, the Mihaly Caesar thing about
yeah.
like it's not boring, it's not overwhelming. It's just like a just nice Goldilocks zone of
Mhm.
creativity. And yeah, it's funny that I haven't been more audacious, agentic. I don't know how to put it, but like it is itself a domain of creativity. So again, it's like you build, if like McDonald's is a burger factory, then there's the burger factory that makes the
Yep.
burger
Mhm.
factories, right? So and like yeah, I haven't, and I guess part of what I think about becoming from hobbyist, going from hobbyist to being a professional is going from, so I am a writing factory, or like you know each piece of writing is
Mhm.
produced in a writing factory, and like I'm trying to figure out the writing factory right, yeah, you get it. The words
Yeah,
a bit blurry, but
yeah. But
the
I mean,
meta
just
process,
yeah, but just for the purpose of the instruction manual,
right? Yeah,
it feels like the heuristics. I mean,
what works,
and
what doesn't work.
yeah, and one chapter can be, or one part of it can be what puts the creative in flow. So it sounds
Yeah,
like one of these things is compartmentalizing. I mean,
yeah,
the word vomits project has some
yeah,
signal there in terms of there's some structure that gives the creative more flow,
yeah.
right? There's some types of structure,
Yeah, so
and
I
yeah,
have it for word vomits. I have it for Twitter because every tweet is like that. And like Substack for me, I have not yet solved for myself that structure thing where I believe, and I don't think this is delusion, but you can tell me if you think it is. But like I believe if I can find some slight change in angle for how I'm thinking about what a Substack post is, I should be able to produce them at a faster rate, I feel.
ah, I have a feeling that after you write this instruction manual, you'll
Yeah.
be much closer to the answer
Yeah, I feel that too. Like there's something because it's
because
like
yeah,
I know that I can output text or voice, or like I can just output stuff. But I guess the question is, so the creative, so let me like walk you through my Substack process, sort of, that happens
Mhm.
quite often.
Mhm.
So most often what happens is it's a long day, everything, blah, blah, blah. I put my son to sleep at like 8:30, whatever. And then I'm tired, but I go and shower and I could get to bed and I open my laptop. And I'm like, okay, let's try and write a Substack post now. Probably a bad idea because I've repeated this experiment 100, 200 times maybe. I've gotten like 7-ish posts out of it. Then those feel like the stars happen to align, and maybe I was thinking about it at lunch and something. But the likeliest outcome each time is that I start writing, doesn't seem to be going anywhere, or I'm starting to lose focus, or I just don't feel good about it, I guess. And then I just kind of it's not gonna work. Let's just call it a night. And that feels like it shouldn't. And so sometimes I've been distracted from the Substack because it's not working. And then I happen to write like a nice Twitter thread that goes well. And I feel satisfied that I wrote a good Twitter thread today that resonated with people. So I consider that like a small creative win. But like it's not, it kind of contributes a little bit to my personal understanding of the things I'm talking about. But it's not moving the needle on Substack essays that I want to be moving on. So it feels like uh I'm approaching it. I mean, so I gotta spend more time thinking about this and like include it in the thing that I'm just the what works and what doesn't work. So that's an example of the thing that doesn't work. And I've been, it works
Mhm.
so infrequently that it's a lousy strategy.
What specifically doesn't work?
Uh,
Trying to come up with a Substack
on trying
post.
to write on the spot at the end of the day.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay, so a couple of things. One is definitely your instruction manual should have a do's and don'ts. So that would be a don't, right? So the
yeah.
producer now has a
And then like why,
guide
right? Like
for, yeah.
yeah.
The other thing, just as maybe as a digression, um, it feels like, and again, once it feels like this conversation will uh, be easier to have and be way more effective after you write this instruction manual,
Hmm.
because there'll be so much meat there to work on. And let me give you one example. Once you kind of tease apart why the word vomits and tweets work for you, it feels like there's some pieces make up the whole kind of flavor to it. And once you've articulated that, it feels like you'll be able to come up with a new form of expression, which is not a tweet and not a Substack essay, but some custom made structure for the Visa creative.
Mm. Oh, and, so a cool thing that happened yesterday, or I don't think this would have happened if not for us planning our call. So we planned our call. I wrote the thing, and so like at point five, I said some stuff about being disappointed with how my Substack posts are like.
Mhm, mhm,
Uh, it seemed to me that I just kept grumbling about the creative process in all my essays, and so I wrote down that in the thing, like I don't want to just
mhm,
grumble about the
mhm,
creative
mhm,
process,
mhm,
and then I'm
mhm,
like,
mhm,
is that
mhm,
true though? Because it's a feeling, and that's how it feels on the
mhm,
inside. But is that
mhm,
true? So what I went was
mhm,
I went and like did an audit of not even
mhm,
all the posts yet. So I've published like 27-ish posts. I reread like 15 to 20 of them, and I plotted them out like on a scalpel map, and I found that there are all these. So there is a clear, um, there's a clear landscape of different things that I talk about. So there is creative struggle stuff, but there's also this. So I'm very excited about like the region that's like about branching paths and different mediums and hypertext, which is kind of around this like what we've discussed about like how do you be online and not go crazy and not like succumb to scrolling and stuff. So there's a bunch of stuff in that region, and there's a bunch of other stuff. So until but what's relevant to this call is like before I did that, I felt, oh man, my Substack is just me grumbling all the time. So what's going on? Like, so it's almost like I don't know if it's so even the creative by himself is like, I'm not doing anything. And like I guess it's like the professional who's come along and say, are you sure? Like, let's look at the stuff, you know. And you look at the stuff, and it's more complex and more detailed and nuanced than my emotional feeling of it was. And then I feel this expansion and excitement of, oh, now that I've plotted it out, I can see some clear like gaps and some clear small opportunity spaces where, like how I said, and now I'm connecting the dots to how when I said going from fan one to fan two sounds depressing and like overwhelming, but like a fan DLC is like smaller and contained and like sweet spot structure wise. Similarly, I think rather than think of each Substack essay as a standalone thing, and when I say standalone thing, my creative spins it into, oh, if it's a standalone Substack essay, it's gotta be like, so like last year I wrote Are You Serious, which is like very popular and like people share and say it's the best thing they read that year and stuff. And like mentally I'm like, oh, I should replicate that class of essay every week if I can. Like it's not realistic. But like even that essay, now that I think about it and I'm saying out loud, that essay took me weeks of iteration and stuff. So there's no way I could have written it in one night. But I see, so my creative has all this not very wise thoughts. But once I see I'm looking at it now. Like once I see the map, I see the smaller spaces where a post could go. And if I can see how the post fits within the whole, the post no longer needs to do everything. I think one of the painful or like a failure mode, so the thing that ruins my process. And this even without money in the picture or readers or whatever. So just when you expect a piece of writing to deliver a tremendous range of things all at once, like that just makes it overburdened and then it doesn't feel fun to write anymore and stuff like that. But if you're like, well, this is a piece within this ocean of other pieces, and you can read this, you can read that, and you piece together everything, then it's much less burdensome. And then I think so it's like all the variables shift positive words. Like I could then maybe potentially, if I pick out a micro draft from this, then I could probably write at night and have like a 800 word, smallish thing, but it contributes to the bigger whole. I feel like that's tweet adjacent or like word vomit adjacent. Probably that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I mean, from kind of stepping back, it just feels like Creative Visa is struggling because the producer is shoehorning him into existing forms that weren't custom built for Creative Visa. And I think by chance, Twitter happened to be the most Creative Visa compatible form. But it feels like this is only because this hasn't been articulated and customized, right? And you're searching for existing forms of mediums to jam a Creative Visa into, and you've realized that, okay, Twitter has the least impedance mismatch, and Substack has a ton of, it's too much friction. So everybody's just miserable when you try to force the Creative Visa into that form. And form is too vague here. It's specific, some kind of cadence and structure and parts making up the whole. And this is the producer's instruction manual task, right? And you should have enough experience to be able to articulate this. Again, you just catalog what has happened historically, what form. So you have word vomit as some kind of form. Mm-hmm. You have Twitter as some kind of form, right? So you have
posts.
Yeah, exactly. You should be able to, from that, kind of divine what is the Visa brain wiring, creative brain wiring compatible content structure.
Yeah, I think that's so. It's continue auditing more stuff. It's interesting. I okay. I think that's enough for like a lot of stuff to chew on for my. So if we were just having a one-on-one, like we'll end the session there. Like, okay, that's great. I'm gonna go and do these things. These are my follow-up steps. I've written it down. But before we end the recording, I want to kind of step back and think about mirror sessions and what just happened here, for example. So I knew this would be helpful because we have a history of you helping me. But I don't know if I knew where we were going in the. So did you know? Like, so I'm curious. So because I sort of played this role for other people as well, and I'm curious to hear from you, like. At what point in the call, or maybe it's before the call, did you have a sense of the shape of how you were going to help me, like what you were going to say or what you're going to observe? Was it like in real time, or how do you?
Yeah, I don't think you can predict it. I think it's mostly real time. I think what you want to watch for, and the reason why you can kind of predict that in a lot of cases it will be helpful, is because the nature of the way we think is, one, we don't make things precise unless we're forced to. And in this case, an external conversation forces precision about the way you think. And you've talked about people shaped. All of that is kind of a flavor of this, which is you are trying to make something precise for a particular context because that context demands it, right? And so the mirror session is a context that demands precision because you have to explain yourself to somebody else. So I know part of the process is going to be you are going to make stuff precise that wasn't precise before.
Right.
Okay, so there's one element there. The other element is I know, again, because, and I write about this in headsets and all the other pieces, right? I know that you fill in gaps a certain way. I mean, and I fill in gaps a certain way, and everybody does, right? But I know that the perspective I have about what you are saying as you are making it precise will be different from your perspective. So I know for a fact with high confidence that there will be stuff that you're making precise that you haven't made precise before. And I know with high confidence that I will approach that precision in a very different way than you will. And when I say approach, I mean I will contextualize that precision in a very different way than you will. Because we have different experiences. I mean, any two people have such different experiences that when you present them with the same precision, they will contextualize it differently, right? And I mean, if that's too abstract, this whole thing about, so you've made precise this thing about the producer and the creative.
Right.
And it's very obvious to me that from my context that when you're trying to work with, say, a creative person, you yourself want an instruction manual. I mean, maybe not an instruction manual, but you want a set of heuristics that work with this very individual, a customized set of heuristics that work with this individual. You won't have that perspective, possibly, because it's you.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And it's not just that, there are just an infinite dimension of ways that we will contextualize this producer creative dynamic differently. And I know that just mixing those two things, which is you will make things precise that you didn't make precise before, and I will approach that new precision in a way that you will approach it, I mean, from a different way than you. That just is a very fertile ground for discoveries.
Wait, did you say, I think you might have said it, but can you repeat?
Yeah.
So you said, you know that I'm going to make something precise that I hadn't made precise before.
Yes.
And the reasoning for that is that, what is the reasoning for that?
This context demands that precision.
Right.
A mirror session is a context that demands precision from you.
Right.
Along a very specific subject. And unless you've had this exact same conversation with an exact same person, I'm going to look at different parts of that vagueness and demand or request precision in different ways.
That's interesting.
Does it make sense?
So I feel like you just described almost like a sales pitch is not the right word, but like a enticing frame for how to think about why conversations are interesting, right? Like, so, like what, like just the, so if you are and just explaining things to people, or like why it's just, it's useful, I mean it's fun for its own sake or whatever, but like it's in part because it tickles your brain in when you're just by yourself, you're seeing it from your usual perspective, and then someone demands precision or like requests precision. Like, what do you mean by that? What's your context? What's your, it's interesting.
Yeah, and the meta part about this is you are demanding precision about this in a way that I haven't thought about before. And so even what I just described isn't really fully captured in the post. And I may even update it because the conversation with a unique other person with a set of unique experiences is going to request precision in a different way, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the meta here is like, so I also try to have these conversations with people. I mean, I don't explicitly call it mirror sessions or whatever, but like I try to be useful to people in conversation, and some of what I do is some of what you do. And I don't think I had much clarity about the precision thing.
Yeah. The difference though is the mirror session is specifically about your goals and blockers.
Right.
So what you've just described, which is this precision thing, is all conversation, but the objective of most conversations is either fatigue or not for the purpose of unblocking someone in a specific way, right? So the precision that you demand, that is requested in your average conversation, is within the context of that conversation, because you're trying to find out more about the story, or
Right.
you don't understand something, but it's not directed in the way that a mirror session is directed towards achieving an outcome.
Yeah. So when you have, so if there's no, like it's like, so there's that quote about how, like, if you don't know where you're going, like any road will take you there, right? So like
Mhm.
if you don't have an outcome in mind, then like you can increase precision in
Yes,
any
exactly.
direction, and it's not actually, it might be interesting, but it's not bringing, like, you don't know if you're
Yeah,
right,
I
you
mean,
don't know if
it's achieving the objective of that conversation, which is
right.
fatigue,
Yeah.
commiseration,
Right.
whatever, some social purpose. And so it's solving its objective. It's just that
Yeah.
the mirror session has a very specific other objective, or a very, objective for itself, that then we are applying precision, and that it helps to get.
That's so interesting. Like, yeah, so like now I'm independently kind of wondering, how long left to my own devices would I have taken to eventually come up with I should write a manual for myself? Uh, Maybe
Mhm,
I wouldn't say manual, but like I think I don't know. I mean, it's not. It's just I don't even know if that's
mhm,
a useful curiosity. I think in almost every, like, get like it's asking that question is only useful to the degree of, like, well, there
mhm.
are opportunities everywhere, right? And you just
Yeah.
you act on the one that's in front of you, and then you remember that whatever you think you have in front of you is not necessarily the best way to think, or like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a mirror session, you would probably pause that line of precision and explore something else again,
Right.
because there's a specific objective. But in a regular fatigue
Oh, it might be
conversation,
fun to, yeah, like, oh, let's
exactly,
talk probabilities, let's talk
exactly,
possibility,
yes,
and it's fun. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So okay, yeah, I get,
And so
yeah.
it solves its own purpose.
Mhm.
So that's the difference. So all conversation is requesting precision in any dialogue, right? Any kind of useful dialogue is requesting precision in some way. But mirror sessions specifically are trying to do something out of that, right?
That's probably a tweet there. Like, so all conversations are requesting something,
Yeah,
not necessarily.
precision in a yeah.
And
Mm.
I mean, this is, yeah, it's probably this. You can workshop that if you want,
Yeah.
but yeah, okay. I mean, I got a lot out of this, and I. Is there anything else we should cover, or we should? So
No, I
well,
think that's it. I mean, the whole point of these sessions is it's not meant to solve a problem necessarily. It's just get you to a new level that
mhm,
then you can build as a foundation for more precision along some dimension. So just having this guide, it feels like, well, or whatever you want to call it, instruction manual or guide or heuristics or
yeah.
historic account, will get you will be a good foundation for having another session on top of.
Right, because then you can see, so like, yeah, so at the start of this conversation, we are aware of some kind of conflict that
Yeah,
is patterned in a way that's suboptimal, but like we
yeah,
can't get, so we've spent an hour and a half plus trying to discuss some of the specifics, but like,
mm,
you know if I sat down and wrote about it, and like I could map out much more detail, and then we might spot some new pattern in there that
exactly.
is
So that's the point of mirror sessions kind of building on top of one another, right? I mean,
right.
even the one-on-ones we've had, it's never been, hey, after one session, magically everything is solved.
Right.
Is that you have to approach it again and again from different angles, but your vocabulary gets more useful when you talk about it again, and you have that conversation with yourself
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there's an
Yeah.
element there of yeah, building on top of it.
I wanna write a post about inception. Like, so it's for frame studies, which is like multi levels. So there's many angles to it. I could probably write. Again, I mean, there's many things to be. The movie Inception I feel is a useful Trojan horse for talking about a lot of other things. And one of the things is like how, so you're familiar with the plot, like they're trying to
Mhm.
incept the
Yeah,
idea in
yeah,
the guy,
mhm.
and they don't know when they go in the first level into the first dream, like what they're gonna do. They just have an intention, Like, oh, the goal is to change this guy's mind, but they don't know how they're going to change his mind, right? But then they do like some kind of interrogation. I might be missing some details in between, but they find in the first level of the dream the photo of him and his father, and he's playing with a pinwheel, and so they're like, ah, that's a emotionally charged object in a
Yeah.
photo that they can use at the next level of the dream, and know that it's of significance. And yeah, you don't know. I'm partially trying to insert myself a little bit in that you don't necessarily know what the best object will be until you've done the first layer of thing and you see what comes up, right?
Yeah. So back to your original question in terms of, hey, how much do you know that the mirror session will help, or how much, how deliberate is it? Right? It really is exploratory, and you don't take it in any direction. You really, it's like going and seeing, hey, okay, there's a photo here,
Yeah,
but you know there will be photos
right. Yeah,
because you
the
know
dream is
precision.
yeah
Yes.
the dream is always populated by the
Yes.
person with they will just can did you see the WordPress and DHH WordPress founder and DHH drama recently?
Somewhat, a little
There's
bit,
some
yeah.
stuff. It's amazing to me. And I kind of like both of them somewhat. Like I don't have whatever. But like so they're having like a heated exchange. And it's amazing how much people will volunteer information about themselves unintentionally. Like it's so revealing. Like I don't even want to say it on this call, but like is if someone posted a naked picture of themselves, it would be less revealing than the things sometimes people say while like criticizing someone else. And they're like, how come you do this? Why aren't you doing that? And it's like, why? Like, and then so I imagine if you read that, you'd be like, oh, that's the pin, that's the photograph that and no one even asked, right? Like just the person just volunteers that information. I guess we are all leaking information all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so that's how, I kind of approach them, in that I know there will be photos to work on because because that precision hasn't been demanded before typically, or hasn't been requested before. And as long as you're contextualizing the session, and the mirror session has a very specific purpose, as long as you have that purpose, you are trying to shine new perspectives on the precision, and there will be new perspectives because your perspective is completely different from the person who you're speaking to.
But now I'm in like in a slightly journalist-ish mode, which is like, okay, so there will be photos, right? There will be information that comes up that you can drill down further into. But how do you recognize and okay, so you start the session with tell me about a goal, right? That's part of the mirror session framing. Mirror session framing is tell me about a goal. So when they start telling you about a goal, there will be language that comes up that has signs or clues to what else you could get into. How do you recognize which clues to tap into? So for example, with my thing that I sent you, you notice right away that I mentioned money repeatedly. And like so like is so yeah, my curiosity is that from your experience as a founder, or is like from your knowledge of me, or so I don't know if I would have recognized that pattern in someone else's writing. Maybe I might, but I
I mean, I guess it isn't so much from the founder perspective. I think it is just kind of my own idiosyncrasy or pathology, which is I notice something's inconsistent, right? Which is you are saying X, you are saying you are writing about X, but you're writing about Y.
Right.
And there's some parallel between that and vagueness, right? Because there's some imprecision about the way you're thinking about what you're even writing about. When you're writing about Y, but you think you're writing about X, there's vagueness between X and Y in your mind. Because if those were two different, precisely distinct concepts, you wouldn't mix them up.
Oh shit.
And so what I'm just trying to do is make precise the fact that these two things are separate, but you seem to be merging them together, which is just vagueness expressed in a different way. And so you're not looking for clues, you're just looking for vagueness.
Or the clue is the vagueness, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
however
I
you want
mean,
to
clue
frame
is
it. Sure.
a bit of a loaded word, but you're
Like
just looking for vagueness and
inconsistencies or like patterns.
you are just trying to
Yeah.
make vagueness precise. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've come to when I'm trying to explain what intuition is like so things happen in fields or contexts, right? So it's like very often intuition is something happens in this field, but the things around it don't react the way they normally would. And
Mhm,
so it's not the thing that you see, but that everything else did not react
mhm,
the way
mhm,
they might in
mhm.
something. This feels kind of similar,
Yeah,
but
you're noticing some meta characteristic about the expression, not the expression itself.
right. So that actually feels like a potentially profound. I mean, it's just it's just and I remember you like it's a decade ago, right? Like
Mhm.
reading people's stuff like blog posts or whatever,
Ah, yes.
and like see you have a lot of
Yeah,
experience examining. So the person says whatever they're saying, and
yeah.
then what comes up that doesn't seem to need to be there, but
Yes,
it's there,
same. It's the same.
right?
Yes,
Yeah,
correct. So it's the same thing, and that's probably some unique kind of wiring to me. And the hope is to be able to decentralize these mirror sessions to have other people do it. But I mean, that's TBD.
my
Yeah.
instinct is that you can probably teach people to be mirrors, but probably every mirror
Ah,
person will be
sure.
slightly different. So like and yeah, like
Yeah.
there might be some central core things that is discernible by
Yeah,
all
the
skilled
central
mirrors.
core thing would just be seek precision. I mean, as much as you can detect vagueness. So different people might have different degrees to which they see something is vague versus not.
Mm,
But everybody's had a conversation before where they have asked the person to
right,
clarify something.
right,
So that is kind of innate to people. So
yeah,
as long as you make everything that you think is vague, you request precision on that,
right,
even if you don't detect all the vague things,
right.
and
Any
then
yeah,
apply your own perspective to ask about that precision in your own context, it feels like that would be the raw ingredients.
nice. I bet that would be so. Is that how you phrase it in the post that you wrote?
No, not I mean not to this degree of precision because
So it's
it
my
wasn't requested,
that's
but
my
yeah,
it's my
this
my
would be
return gift for your gift of the session, right? Like
yeah,
I just want to be useful back.
yeah.
Yeah, we can talk for hours, but my kid's outside,
Sounds
so
good.
I gotta
Okay.
run.
All right.
I'm gonna upload this to YouTube, and then I'll send you
Sure.
the link.
Okay.
Always lovely chatting with you.
All
So
right.
super
Okay.
super helpful. I'm gonna do the guide, the
Sounds
do's and
good.
don'ts manual. Like I'll
Let me see
I'll
that once
probably
you
do
have
it in
it.
the doc itself. So if you want to read it, you can.
Cool. Okay.
Cool, cool, nice.
All right.
Okay, take care,
Okay.
man.
See
See ya.
you.